Haere mai ki te kaupapa te Puna ako, te kaupapa ki Hapori, ko te wea whiki tōku ingoa he mokopono au no Ngāti Haua me Ngāti Koroki Kahukura. And I just want to mihi to you all for joining us today. Now, as you would have seen in the beginning, Vera was encouraging all of us to do some whakawhanaungatanga. So we would love to hear where you're dialing in from today. If you haven't already, we'd love to hear your pepeha, and also where you're calling in from, and also what encouraged you to join. So I'll encourage you to do that as well as we open this space. So I just want to dedicate some time to reading it out as we're all just taking a moment. So we're welcoming Erica, kia ora, Shinyan Kwaila, happy Chinese New Year. Calling in from Ōtautahi, Christchurch. We've got Joe as well from Ingarangi. Kia ora, whaingaroa, lots of little fires. Kai, Ōtautahi, Hong Kong, California. Kia ora. Rawe. We've got Mike from Wellington, tēnā koutou. And as those keep rolling in, I'm going to ground us in. So I'm going to invite us to take some deep breaths, and also just grounding us in the maramataka today as well, which is Fiddle. So full moon energy, red moon energies, and yeah, just acknowledging that and the transition period that we're in as well with the Chinese calendar as well. So we're going to take a deep breath in together just to ground and land into the space. So ha ki roto. Ha ki waho, ha ki roto, ha ki waho, ha ki roto, ha ki waho. And I want you to take hold of a pātai, a question that you want to ground in to find the answer out for today as well. So that is the intro from me, and I'm going to pass over to Vera to lay down the tikanga of this kaupapa. Kia ora.
Kia ora, Ja, thank you. Yeah, so the tikanga for today's meeting is just to keep your mic muted, ask all your questions in the Q&A function so they can be addressed after the presentation has been finished. You're welcome to use the emojis and do the reactions there. Feel free to eat and have your camera off if you need to, but it is lovely to see everyone. So if you are comfortable having your camera on, please feel welcome to do so. And as I was mentioning with the recording, if anyone is needing something adjusted so that they are not included in the recording of this that will go on YouTube afterwards, please let me know in the chat and I'll take care of addressing that for you. So yeah, that's all that we really need to be mindful of today, is just respecting the space and just keeping an eye on the timelines. So that's all from me, Ja.
Cool, and over to Tanya.
Yeah. Kia ora, e te whānau, e te hapori whānau. Mei Fueros is van die Netherlands in Zuid-Afrika. Mei Tūranga Waiwai is whaingaroa. He tangata tiriti aho. Ko pau arahi o seed, Waikato Seeds for Change, me seed Waikato aho. Ko Tanya Poynton toko ingoa. No mai, hara mai. Firstly, thanks to Ja and to Vera for opening the space so beautifully for us with the mihi and the karakia and the grounding. You've really set the scene for us. Thanks also for mentioning the whiro, Ja, the new moon, because it's reminding us to rest, to recuperate, and also to spend time with family. So on behalf of our Hapori champions, thank you for choosing right now to spend some time with us together in Te Puna ako, our spring of learning. It's when we gather like this that I get hopeful. I'm reminded of a quote by the Nobel Prize-winning scientist, Ila Prigogine, I think is how you pronounce it, when he said, when a complex system is far from equilibrium, small islands of coherence in a sea of chaos have the capacity to shift the entire system to a higher order. It's a really powerful quote, and it is hopeful, because I think that's what we're doing right now. We may be feeling like we're drowning in our economic systems, the current state strained and it's inequitable, but here we are building some islands of coherence thanks to the peeps and the whānau at the Wellbeing Economy Alliance who are guiding us through. This is an opportunity for us to create safe space together, to think differently, to connect differently, and to even imagine differently. It's the true intention behind what we're trying to create here in Hapori and through the Spring of Learning to Puna Ako. Today, we're privileged to welcome Gareth Hughes. Gareth is the director of WEAll Aotearoa. He's an author, he's a political commentator, he served a decade as Green MP, where he chaired the Social Services and Community Select Committee, and before that was a climate campaigner at Greenpeace. We're also thrilled to welcome Sally Hett, Knowledge and Engagement Lead for WEAll Aotearoa. Sally brings deep experience in social policy research, including leadership at the McGuinness Institute, advisory work on the Mental Health and Addiction Inquiry, GovTech initiatives, and Māori data sovereignty kaupapa. So Sally and Gareth, no mai haramai, it's so good to have you with us. You now have the floor for the next 35 minutes or so. Over to you. We're excited for you to share what you have with us today. Kia ora.
Thanks, Tanya. Kia ora, na mihi nui kia koutou. Kia ora, e whānau mai o i te taha o te awa Tarawhiti, Gisborne, hiuri aho no Wales, Scotland, ki te noho o Kia Poneki, Wellington, ko Gareth Hughes taku ingoa. So I'm Gareth. I've got the great fortune to work with Sally. She'll introduce herself a little bit later on. And thank you very much for the privilege to address the Hapori Network. Huge admiration for the mahi of the network and the people behind it. It's really important, this network. So kia ora to all of you. Happy Chinese New Year. I'm going to share my screen and we're going to try. It'll be a bit of a challenge for us because we normally love talking about this in detail. So a challenge to keep it really condensed. But my son has started university today. So we're calling this the Wellbeing Economy 101. We wanted to introduce some of the key concepts, some of the key ideas, some of the mahi that's happening in Aotearoa around this. I'm going to be a bit of the grumpy old man talking about the problems in the world, and then Sally's going to be a ray of sunshine talking about the solutions and what we can do about it. So just to start, I thought I might start with a simple question. When we talk about the economy, what do you think about? Just take a minute to think, what does the economy mean to you?
Yeah, you could even, if you wanted to post in the chat, like the first thing that comes to your mind, or like one of your key memories of the economy. Maybe it's pocket money or, yeah.
Great idea.
The slide's sort of giving it away a little bit, potentially, with that difference, hey?
So keep putting that in the chat, how money circulates, the flow of resources, poverty and struggle. I know for me personally, growing up in Tarawhiti, Gisborne, it was kind of a negative story with, Dad's job at the freezing works ending, mum's benefit being cut under Ruth Richardson. Heaps of great ideas. I love the healthy contribution to give and to take. We wanted to start with this question because often when we talk about the money in the media or in Parliament, they're talking about dollars, they're talking about what banks talk about, they talk about statistics which are measured by government departments. We need to remember, though, that actually the economy is so much more wider than that. The economy, the original word for it comes from ancient Greek, and it's oikos. It simply means household. So when we talk about the economy, we're talking about real people and real whare, with real rain hitting the roof that flows off into real rivers and streams to moana. So when we talk about the economy, we're talking about in the widest possible conception. Really, it's just a way of socially organising our collective resources to satisfy our needs. That's material, immaterial, both human and ecological.
Both now and in the future. I feel like that's a bit we could add,
Yep.
Thinking about future generations and their access.
And I'm rapt to see so many people here to talk about the economy, because for a lot of people, it's sort of an incredibly boring topic that they want to avoid. One of my favourite economists from Cambridge University, Ha-Joon Chang, describes it as the economy is too important to leave to the economists. So that's why it's wonderful to be sharing this time with you and talking about what is such an important topic. If there's one key message I would love from you to take away from this kōrero today, it's that the economy is a product of design and can be redesigned. There are no natural laws, there's no reason why things have to be the way they are. Often we talk about the economy as if it's the weather, something that comes and goes, but we need to remember the economy, the system, all the outcomes we see are the result of deliberate decisions. For me, that's an incredibly hopeful message, because what we can see is these deliberate decisions can be changed. A system can be redesigned. So the one key message, the economy is a product of design, therefore it can be redesigned. So introducing ourselves, WEAll Aotearoa is a tītiriti-led, non-partisan, think and do tank building a movement, empowering people to redesign Aotearoa's economy around the well-being of our people and te tao. We're trying to flip the script, because at the moment it's people and planet in service to the economy. Let's flip that so it's an economy in service to people and planet. So what we're going to cover is why we need a wellbeing economy, look at the global movement that we're part of, some of the key strategies, our work and the wellbeing economy in action. Wanted to start with this little cartoon again to remind us the stakes, what we're talking about. Yes, the planet got destroyed, but for a beautiful moment in time, we created a lot of value for shareholders. Look, I'm going to quickly go over some of the problems. I'm sure this is nothing new to people as part of this network. But look, we have a deeply unsustainable economy. That graphic to the right there, for me, is a really powerful image. The weight of the stuff that we produce and consume, all the plastic wrappers, all the concrete, all the tar seal on the roads, now actually weighs more than all the living biomass on planet Earth, the plants, the animals, the stuff that we've made. If we just look at plastics alone, which we know can take thousands of years to biodegrade, the weight of the plastics we've made in the last 70 years is more than the weight of all the mammals on land and in the oceans. So we're having a huge impact on this planet. We're seeing planetary boundaries being breached. One of these breaches would be a huge warning light on the global dashboard, but in fact we're breaching 6 of the 9 planetary boundaries at the moment. We're doing it because we constantly try and grow the economy and consume more and more materials and resources. But what we also know is we have a deeply unjust economy at the moment. Despite all that growth and all the resources we're making, we're not sharing it very fairly. There's heaps of statistics around child poverty we could share, but I think maybe to bring it back to values, in a country as rich as Aotearoa, that no child should be growing up in material hardship and poverty. Likewise, with so much wealth, why aren't we sharing it more fairly? If you look around the world, currently 4 men, individual men, have more wealth than the poorest 4 billion people on the planet. Is that just that 4 people have more wealth than 4 billion? This is a graphic that describes inequality, or the gap between wealth in Aotearoa. If we took all the money in New Zealand and split it into 10 plates of food for a dinner party with 10 people, the way we currently split that wealth in Aotearoa is the richest 10% have 5 plates of food, the middle have 1 plate of food each for 4 diners, but the other 50% at the bottom of the table, those 5 donors, have to share a single plate amongst them. We're a deeply unfair, unequal economy. This is all coming together, the fact our unjust, unsustainable economy, and something globally people call the polycrisis. The idea that we have a very complex set of interconnected crises happening that are actually interacting in ways that it's impossible to predict. But that polycrisis, I think, can be a bit of a wake-up call. This is a graphic that comes from the Society of Actuaries in the UK. These are the guys who spend all days on spreadsheet trying to calculate risk for the insurance industry. What they're posing is this question: we're at a fork in the road where we risk planetary insolvency. What they mean by that, unfortunately, is risks to billions of people going forward in future generations, but also an economy which could be reduced by 50%, by half, by 2070, if we continue down this world of extreme climate change and biodiversity collapse. But they also say that we've got a fork in the road and we can choose an abundant prosperity where everyone leads good lives with enough material that their needs and wants are met. So when the risk guys are saying we're risking planetary insolvency, I think that should be a wake-up call for our leaders. Unfortunately, though, what we see from our government and frankly most political parties in Parliament is the idea that if we just grow the economy, we're going to be able to afford the money to solve the problems which weren't being solved in the first place when the economy was growing before. So the government and all political parties almost believe that we need to grow the amount of stuff and materials in the economy to solve our problems. Problem, of course, is that this is a really expensive way of dealing with our problems. A big idea that we're trying to introduce to Aotearoa from around the world, and Waikato Regional Council have picked up on it, which is fantastic, is the idea that we continue to spend a huge amount of money to respond to the things that we continue to break. We're not fixing things, we're putting more and more expensive band-aids on them. My personal journey to this mahi came from working at Greenpeace in politics, feeling like I was working really hard trying to improve the ambulance at the bottom of the cliff. How can we think upstream and actually fix these problems, which, will save money, but more importantly, will actually fix the problems which are causing real pain? For decades, governments have chased gross domestic product, or GDP, which is a measure we developed during World War II to count the amount of bombers and tanks that were produced to see who might win the war. It's become now the most important goal for national governments across much of the world. The problem is, of course, that an oil spill boost GDP. The cleanup from the extreme weather events we've been seeing recently boost GDP. A vape store opening boosts GDP. It's not a real measure of progress. This is how we've run the economy at the moment. We grow the economy, we then use some of the taxes and budgets to try and fix the problem. But then because the problems continue, we then have to keep growing the economy as a result of many of the problems actually caused by it in the first place. So at this part, I'm going to pass it on to Sally, who's going to talk about how we can break out of this disruptive cycle, flip the script, and some of the answers and solutions that are so exciting and inspiring.
Cool. Oh, thanks for that, Gareth. Yeah, really laying it all out for us, but seeing how all of these things are so interconnected and that the economic system is at the root of it. What I'm going to touch on now is kind of showing that, we're not alone in working on this problem. We're not alone in thinking this is a big issue and that we're part of a global movement. And so, yeah, as the Wellbeing Economy Alliance Aotearoa, we are an organisation that's part of this global alliance that has organisations in about 18 different countries. The global team, they also have their own policymakers network, an academics network, and a governments network, which New Zealand was a foundational member of. And so we have ways that we connect in with these other hubs to learn what they're doing, so we can share that learning down locally here, but also share back the amazing work that is happening in Aotearoa. What's common across all of these organisations is that we kind of see the wellbeing economy as kind of an umbrella term for these different strategies. So we're not prescribing that the economy will look one particular way, everywhere. It's dependent on local histories and contexts and place and cultures. But a lot of these strategies kind of came to similar conclusions and similar values, and that we need to work better together to really drive a movement for them. And also taking it kind of from more like academic spaces into practice, doing it on the ground. And also to acknowledge that in Aotearoa, we have our own wellbeing economy strategies that have been around for a very long time. There's so much amazing work and leadership from Māori economies. These are just some examples up here. Manaho economies of mana, the Aroha economy, and you can dive into all of these, but we just wanted to acknowledge that there's so much practice and leadership of these in place that we can learn from, and actually research showing that wellbeing economy strategies sort of align at a values level with Te Ao Māori and these economic practices. So yeah, seeing ourselves as connected, and any movement for a wellbeing economy is a movement for, tirananga tiratanga and te tiriti. Cool. So the other thing that unites us with the other organizations kind of around the world is this sort of theory of change, that we really see it's going to take sort of new knowledge and the sharing of knowledge, the change that we want to see, a new narrative about the economy, like the story that we can all get behind and sort of see and show that we all have valid experiences and voices about the economy. And then that power base there, that's the connections, it's like, it's not us sitting here doing this, it's all of us together, and we all have a role in how we connect with lots of people and organizations to really push for this change. And you can ripple it out to being in a forest. And then the other thing that we kind of think that we've got the beginnings of is, while we're not prescribing what it looks like in different places, as I said, we sort of have those principles that we think apply across the board, or kind of conceptualizing them as the corners of the puzzle. We might not know exactly what it looks like yet, but we've kind of got the beginnings of it. And so these are, purpose, prevention, predistribution, people-powered or participation, they're all P's, and place. And so I'm going to go through these now and show how it's happening, because I think that's the other thing that, we know and can see, and our job is to kind of amplify is all the amazing work that is happening in places all over the country. And so, now we're going to just jump into the new economy in action. So starting off with purpose, we kind of talked about that a bit before around how at the moment, the economy's core purpose is sort of to grow GDP growth, but what if we had a more holistic purpose for the economy around well-being and equity and intergenerational fairness? And so just showing here that how we kind of measure and look at the success of the economy could be aligned with, say, the Doughnut Economics, where you've got your safe and just space for humanity in the ring of the donut, and then Te Takarangi, which is the Tūhoi Māori interpretation of the donut that has Te Taiao in the center. So kind of adjusting, like learning globally and adjusting for our local place. And then B corporations as an example of purpose, a broader purpose to a business than making profit, and how they enshrine that into their organizations as part of their B Corp certification. So the B Corp crews in New Zealand are doing awesome things. Prevention, we kind of talked about that as well. How do we prevent problems from happening in the first place, be it social or environmental? So here looking at, I guess, some of the zero waste mahi and the parakore movement around food sovereignty. How can we be preventing waste from happening in the first place, going up the hierarchy, and how can we be having access to really nutritious food in place? Next here, we've got the rewiring Aotearoa, and this is kind of looking at how we can save on our electricity bills if we go to electric and we're not as reliant on importing fossil fuels. So that's kind of like, preventing from needing that money and the reducing the carbon emissions kind of in that first place. And then we've got, this is an example of a tool library. And yes, this is my local tool library we launched two weeks ago. But just wanting to kind of bring in the sharing economy here as to, preventing the need to be buying stuff and having individual ownership. How can we better share resources, prevent things from going to waste? So maybe there's repair in there as well. All things around prevention. And there are tool libraries and repair cafes all over the country. Awesome cup over there. Redistribution. This is kind of around how can we get the economy to do more of that heavy lifting by design. So instead of having to, how can our incomes be sufficient for us to live and not have to rely on tax? And we can do a lot of redesign around here. So the living wage is an amazing example where people should get paid enough that they can survive with dignity from their full-time employment. 4-day working weeks. How can we get back? It's like predistribute like the time that we actually want to do other things with our lives. And then the cooperative bank kind of distributes its profit to all its members. So it's sort of like, rather than having the profit then get taxed, and I'm thinking of that graph that Gareth showed, it's sharing that with the members from the beginning. Cool. And people powered. This is that we think that everyone has a voice in decision making for decisions that affect them. And, you know, deliberative democracy practices are really big in here. So we've got the water care example in Auckland, where people came together and made probably a different decision than what might have been done if they hadn't done that full participatory approach. Yes, you can look into what exactly that decision was another time. And then on the right here, we've got the Citizens Assembly, or the Climate Assembly that was done in Porirua, led by Ngāti Toa. And so this was the first Titiriti-led Citizens Assembly, where they had a mana whenua group, a rangatahi group, and the kind of traditional assembly that kind of came together. And yeah, there's some beautiful resources out there to learn about that practice as well. And they're keen for people to do it in their place. I mean, there's so much to talk about. Toitu Titiriti, just showing, you know, a mass people power movement to kind of prevent the government from doing something, but also calling now for more constitutional transformation or things we can do. So yeah, we really saw, I mean, we saw the largest protest that we've had in
History.
ever. Yeah. So people power is possible. And then Make It 16, wanting to add this here, is that it's kind of like the participation of younger people to be involved in the decisions that affect them. So that's changing the voting age to 16, which is a campaign going on at the moment. Cool, one more. And this is, yeah, place. So yeah, in Aotearoa, it's looking to tangata Māori, te ao Māori for leadership. It's also really grounding what's being done in the physical realities of that place. And what works locally. So community wealth building is an economic development model that we kind of champion and do some work with, and that's kind of how we can keep that wealth circulating locally, and which kind of ties into the Hikurangi enterprise, which is an example of an enterprise really focusing on local employment and local jobs within the Tairāwhiti region, recloaking Papatua Nuku, this kind of restoring some Indigenous forests in Aotearoa. I think they're quite based in Tairāwhiti as well. But I think here, right, within places where looking after te taiao and restoring our biodiversity and wetlands and things can really find a home and a part of the economy. And the Papa Whakarito Trust are all about Māori food sovereignty. So seeing that looks different in place depending on soil and seeds and weather and all of that, but that's yeah, really nurturing place and people. Cool, that was a whirlwind from me. Hopefully, yeah, you feel and can see that there's lots that is happening. All right, I'll pass back to Gareth to talk more about how to get involved in what we're up to.
Yeah, thanks, Ellie. And thanks for racing through a huge amount of content. And for me, what I take out from that is when we talk about redesigning the economy, we're not starting with a blank sheet of paper or blue sky thinking. You know, we can see pockets of the new economy that's more sustainable, that's more just in practice. It's all around our communities at the moment. So kind of like a seedling coming up through the soil, we need to make sure we give it water, give it sunlight so it can grow into that thriving forest that Sally mentioned as well. So when we talk about a wellbeing economy, you know, we reflect that this is not a new idea in Aotearoa. It's grounded in Indigenous wisdom and practices. Our vision that when we talk about it to maybe a politician is what we want is a more prosperous Aotearoa. And that's, you know, prosperous measured in terms of the well-being of our community, the health of our environment, the inclusiveness of our societies, not just GDP. In fact, all that good stuff is totally ignored in GDP, like the hundreds of thousands of volunteer hours or the care contribution that particularly women do in New Zealand, just not measured in the official stats of progress. So here in Aotearoa, we use this as a model for how we visualize change over time. What's the unjust, unsustainable stuff we want to compost? What's the cool stuff, the seeds of hope and that green line that we want to give that space and light that it can grow? Where's the point of experimentation and the blue line? And for us, I think Hapori is a great example of this. Yeah, we're collectively experimenting and sharing new knowledge. This has been developed by the Peter McKenzie project and illustrated by Jackie Chan, taking this international concept of the three horizon. They've used a voyaging metaphor with this graphic, which I love. I'm a sailor myself, and when we're trying to get to those islands of the future, that wellbeing economy, we need people on shore now where those islands are invisible, where you can't see it until you're actually close to the island you're sailing with. The people with the courage and the confidence and the leadership to say there's a better alternative. But this illustration also reminds us in the real world, there are currents and weather which gets us closer or further apart. There are other boats out there on the oceans that maybe are pirates trying to do to a different environment. But this shows how change has happened in the past and how change can happen again. In Aotearoa, as a think and do tank, we've got 6, 7 big priorities. The first is a vision for prosperity for Aotearoa, an alternate system, what that could look like and the concrete steps to get there. As part of that, no amount of us doing thinking or report writing will actually change anything. We need to build a movement towards it as well. And we do that through networks, collecting elected representatives, officials at local government, the policymakers network, our conferences and events. We're building a movement to push for these big ideas. We've structured our work around signs of where we see inspiring change that's already happening. So that's things like amplifying Māori economic leadership, those concepts and the great work that Hapori Māori are doing. The place-based solutions, community wealth building, the role of local government in communities, advocating for future generations with our Tomorrow Together campaign. And can I acknowledge Ja, who's part of our Rangatahi leadership group, doing incredible work proposing solutions, how we can think better long-term and achieve intergenerational fairness. The role of business. How can business, as the famous quote goes, solve society's problems profitably rather than profit by causing problems? As you can maybe see in the tech sector and the attention economy, profiting from our collective problems. This all comes together with shifting the narratives. We do this through our presentations, our media, our resources, our videos. We're really trying to flip the script of what the economy is and how it can be redesigned. If you race through some of the mahi we've done in the last few years, we've launched a discussion document at Parliament to promote intergenerational thinking. We connect thinkers and doers in a variety of workshops and networks. We published our Amplify Māori Economy Approaches report, which I'd love it if you could read and share. We've published 100 policies for the local government elections last year, with 80 plus case studies of these things actually happening and going great in New Zealand and around the world. We've promoted community wealth building, publishing a white paper. We've listened to Kiwis on an economics listening tour where we drove around the country and heard from ordinary folks who often don't feel they're even asked what their opinions are on the economy. We've collaborated on business papers, and we're currently working on a full business paper at the moment, which we're going to be connecting all the fantastic concepts or tools like B corporations, the way companies could perhaps have nature on the board or local geographic area on the board, as we've seen with companies like Hikurangi Enterprises. How can we do really great stuff in our communities while growing jobs and prosperity? As part of that work, trying to flip the script and change the narrative on the economy, we worked with some national experts at the workshop and published a series of guides, which we hope are useful. So please do check them out and use them. They're practical tools. How we talk about the economy is really powerful, how people receive the information and what action they then go on to do. We are regularly talking in the media, publishing articles and op-eds, publishing zines, social media campaigns, and lastly, we host regular events. So we're really rapt to be a strategic partner for Gary Stevenson, a YouTuber, a former investment banker, one of the world's leading communicators and advocates for a more equal society. We've got a great event in Tamaki Makaurau for March with Gary. We've actually got some tickets, which we've got a draw, which people can join. If they join by tomorrow, WEAll Aotearoa, you go on the draw for one of 10 tickets. We've also got a book club. We do regular webinars, 101, introducing the concepts. We do chats, which are kind of meetups, so we get away from our computers and only talk through Teams and Zoom and have in-person conversations. We also do regular supporter calls. We've got a fantastic network of volunteers who we connect, so we're constantly running events as part of that movement building. So that's a really quick summary into some of the problems we're facing. some of the big ideas, those 5 Ps for how we can put the corners of the jigsaw puzzle to build this collective puzzle. Some of our mahi in New Zealand, ways that people can get involved. We'd love it if people would consider joining and being part of this alliance and part of this movement. But again, to finish how we started, this is hopefully a hopeful kōrero. We need to remember that the economy is a product of design. That means it can be redesigned. We do that through our actions as consumers, what we buy, as members, as citizens when we vote. We can transform our economy so it's in service to people and planet if we choose collectively. For me, it's an incredibly hopeful message in a time of polycrisis where so much is going wrong in the world, and here in Aotearoa is one. We can actually choose to have a wellbeing economy. Kia ora koutou. Thanks very much. Looking forward to some discussion.
It's been absolutely amazing. It's so many things. I can't get all the links into chat. But I've got the last one that you have the QR code up for. That's also going to be in chat as well. So if anyone was trying to scan that and just missed it, I believe I've put the right one for that one in there now. So with the questions, we've got the little Q&A feature. So you should be able to see along your top bar, the Q+A, to just pop in there and type out the questions that you have for Gareth and Sally. So we'll just give you a bit of time to have a look through and find those. So I'll just pop up the little graphic mentioning that as well via my screen. And I'll mute myself while we wait for those questions to come in.
And I think also we do, coming up in March, we have both we actually have the supporters call, a Wellbeing Economy 101 and book club all stacked. So on our events page, there's those events. If anyone's interested in coming along, I do love book club. Oh, question.
Yeah, Gareth and Stanley, how if we come into contact with young people and they're wanting to get involved, particularly say about the future generations, not everyone can be on that leadership. What would you suggest, some good ways of explaining the economy and where we're at, and inviting young people to get behind the movement? What are some practical ways we can do that?
Yeah, I mean, so I think like the supporters call is a way to kind of come in and see the work that we've done, the work that we do, and ways to get involved is always a good one. We do have a group of about 15 volunteers, so people who are supporting in different bits of work, and then there's the Future Gen campaign that there's lots to do as part of that.
On our Tomorrow Together campaign, we've got a Tomorrow Together charter. So we're inviting individuals and organisations to sign up to some positive values-based principles to think intergenerationally, to think about intergenerational fairness. So that's a really practical thing. People can do that on the WEAll website. But if people are part of organisations, we've had really large organisations and small organisations add their name and their logo to the charter. And that's a really practical way they can show their support.
So that feedback is still available on the website?
We'd always welcome any feedback on the discussion document, but the charter, that's still open, and we'd love people to sign the charter. Yes.
Okay, so sign the charter or provide feedback of anything you've thought.
Yeah.
And encouraging others to sign the charter, so what can their spheres of influence and who they can talk to get on board. Could be something, and maybe we do bring people together if they're keen and have a little chat about that.
Are there plans to present that again to Parliament? What are the next steps of that, team?
Yeah, well, Jan's actually coming down to Puneki in a few weeks, where our Rangatahi Leadership Group are going through all the submissions that we heard. we were part of a global Reclaim the Economy week the beginning of February, where there was, I think, 90 events happening around the world. One of the events was a webinar in New Zealand where we discussed the discussion document with folks and heard their feedback. So yeah, we're going through that feedback. We'll then present it back to Parliament. You know, politics is pretty divided at the moment and partisan. So for us, it was like incredible to have the youngest MP from National to Party Māori, Greens and Labour come together to host that event with 2 former Labour and National Prime Ministers. So, you know, true cross-party collaboration. And, you know, I think it's pretty great. Like, this should be something that should connect us all across the political spectrum. What kind of future are young people going to grow up in and those not yet born?
Mm. Mm. Mm.
And one other thing thinking about with young people is that at Te Herenga Waka, so you know, some those who are around a university, we have a club, Students for a Wellbeing Economy, but we're always keen on you know, clubs at other unis or what's happening there or how we could support in any way. So that's like an avenue that we can provide some support.
Great to know. Thank you.
By looking at the questions, Jar, we're like 3.5 people. No.
Well, there's 4 of us who do day to day, but we're only 2.4 FTE. So some voluntary mahi from our recently retired Professor of Economics, Paul Dalziel, and the team working part-time. But we're supported by an incredible board, amazing volunteers and supporters.
Is that Lydia? Do you have your hand up?
Yeah, I do, but I wasn't sure whether asking a question over microphone was allowed or if I should type it, so I'm halfway through that as well.
Go for
Shall
it,
I-
Lydia.
Yeah? Okay.
Yeah.
Oh, kia ora kōrero. So nice to see you both.
Nice to see you too.
And thank you so much for sharing all of this. Firstly, I just want to say massive mihi to both of you and your broader network for all you're doing. Every time I see something new come out of WEAll, I'm like, how, like related to Jar's question, how on earth are you guys getting this much done? And so I have a question that's around sort of, given that we're a community of systems change practitioners, your sort of approach, theory of change, strategy for systems change, how are you guys thinking about of all the possible things you could do, identifying the leverage points that you do focus on, and B, how are you approaching that sort of, ripples of impact, getting things done, even though you're a small team? What's your sort of way of going about that in terms of the volume of stuff we're seeing relative to how many people there are on the payroll?
Yeah.
You want me to start?
Sure.
That's such a great question. And I think it's something we constantly discuss and challenge ourselves. Like, are we doing the right thing? Is this where we should be putting our resource? I think the first thing to say is it's an incredibly exciting, liberating, but terrifying environment to be working in. There is no guide how to do this. The last time we fundamentally changed the economic system was 40 plus years ago. Sally and I were actually discussing a document that Roger Douglas, the former finance minister, wrote for a neoliberal think tank in 1990. Again, like trying to look at the lessons from the past. So there's no guide. We're making it up as we go. And for us, the way we go about it is as important as where we're going. So we're experimental. We've tried different things, put energy into different spaces as we've got feedback and learnt where to go. We had a really awesome planning retreat late last year. I'm not sure if people have heard of the Escarpment Domes. They're a social enterprise on the Kapiti coast. These beautiful domes. It's kind of like luxury camping, glamping. But we had our planning retreat there and we went through an exercise called the Big Easy, where we looked at all the things we wanted to do and then we mapped it by how much resource or time it took up and how much impact we thought that project or that thing was going to achieve. So what we were trying to find, what's our Big Easy? The biggest impact, the biggest bang for buck. So it was quite refreshing. There was a whole bunch of things we took off the workboard because we didn't think it had the big enough impact for cost. So we kept the things that we thought were the highest impact. In terms of the ripples, what we see is that it's the connections we're having and people have conversations with other people. I had the leader of one of our iwi doing incredible stuff in the economy space contact me today saying, hey, did you see what's happening in Scotland? I've just sent it to a finance spokesperson in Parliament. So that's just a connection that, you know, is
A good example.
A good example, also through our network. So again, our theory of change we find pretty key. We're not just doing research, but new knowledge and new research is important. We're not just building a movement, we're building a movement towards something. And we're not just writing and talking to people, we're actively trying to change conversations and the way we talk about it. I saw there was a question in the chat around maybe how that can be measured. That's a really hard one. We do polling with a professional polling company. We do media monitoring. We do see some of our elected leaders use some of this language, which is really great, and we can see some impact there. But I think it's fair to say that, you know, we're a young organisation, a young movement. We're only just starting out, so there's still so much to go.
And I think on that, in terms of like timing, you know, 2040 is quite a big movement towards there, and a lot of work around kind of social cohesion and our identity and things are building towards that point. So maybe that's something like a really good point to reflect on that change. And then in terms of our work, and like we have that kind of more high level theory of change, and then also with each of those areas that Gareth highlighted, like business or place space or future generations, those have their own like levers and reasons, and the diversity of those is sort of part of it. Like if we were doing all only kind of institutional change and policy and government and legislation, then that's kind of quite out of our power in some ways, if it, you know, governments change. So then looking to like what's happening in community and grassroots and kind of having some that sort of touch on that area, because we see the changes kind of needing both. So yeah, and business can just get on and do it in a way and can show a lot of leadership. So yeah, that's why for some of those areas. I love this kind of chat.
Joe, did you have a question?
Oh yeah, kia ora fam, how we doing? Awesome what you guys are doing, it's incredible. Just real quick, I'm Joe. I run a storytelling project for social change, systems change, kaupapa in the Waikato, called Lots of Little Fires, and just now with the Seed Waikato family have taken me in to be guardian, so it's really cool working with the crew. But my background's in like a lot of social development, youth development, innovation between businesses in communities that are struggling. And one of the things that, on top of everything that you're doing, which is unbelievable, and I relate to small team doing too much, in terms of tangible outcomes for communities that I've had a lot of involvement with, like Tokoroas or Huntleys or places like that, where the predominant industry and employers have lost manufacturing ability. I was wondering, in terms of allies and allies of voices with those large manufacturing business leaders, not so much the B Corp crew, maybe I don't know too much about what organisations they are, but in terms of the mass employment of people in community where there's nothing now. I know we're not talking about Wellbeing Economy as the wellbeing and everything, but without $1 in your pocket and you can't afford to eat, everything else goes out the window, and that's always kind of been my insert. What's our collective partnership with and alignment with the willing industry leaders who have got a strong voice with government to have a voice of the capitalist crew to leverage that conversation as allies, if that makes sense? Because yeah, even if they're not the most environmental, or you know, whatever that relationship is in towns, and I grew up in one myself, sounds like you as well, when that shuts down, all the social things happen, and then all the social services are there picking up pieces, and the main cause is lack of employment. So what's our relationship with those people that go out on the limb and lead businesses to create jobs for the masses? Yeah, I guess that's, yeah, because I'd be keen to.
Yeah, great question, Joe. And hey, we were looking at Lots of Little Fires website before. That's a really stunning website. Well done. That's so cool. Yeah, look, I think it's fair to say we're starting out on that journey. We are having those conversations, but we need to have 100 times more. The main pathway through has been using community wealth building as this really powerful tool to have that conversation with business leaders or councils or economic development agencies. I was over in the UK last year researching how it's worked. I mentioned before that Scotland's just unanimously passed this legislation, making all public authorities and local governments use community wealth building, which keeps wealth circulating locally, helps encourage things like cooperatives, worker-owned entities, especially when, say, a factory or a business is closing. In other countries around the world, they've got incentives or even laws to encourage workers to be able to continue to operate that business. So that's a conversation we're having, and we're getting really great feedback from businesses. People don't really know in New Zealand that we've got a huge range of cooperatives where maybe the workers or the suppliers actually own the company. You know, Fonterra is a cooperative, Mitre 10 is a cooperative. We've got it in business consultancy or fertilizer or vet industries. So there's just so much cooperative. So yeah, we are finding there's a real alignment there. But I guess this is a request, you know, if folks are aware of a larger company who's keen to engage with this, we'd really welcome an introduction.
We had some really interesting questions there today, but we are approaching the ending of our meeting. If there's anything else that you're really wanting to ask, we might need to move those to like an email after the fact. But for today, it's been absolutely wonderful to hear from Gareth and Sally. I've really liked the presentation. There's so many different parts that you're working on. It is hard to believe how small your team is. Yeah, so thank you so much for joining us today. And I'll just mention that we are Hapori, and so Hapori has made this space to do this here today. If you're wanting to be part of the Hapori community, you'll see a few of us have little banners for it. I'll be popping the links in chat so that you're able to read more about it in your own time. But I'll be handing over to, actually, sorry, is it Jar or Tans that we're going to close us off from here?
That would be me, kia ora.
Jar, sorry about that, Jar.
Pēnā, kia ora, and ai tēnei te mihi kia kōrua tahi ko Sally rawa ko Gareth ki tō wahi me tō mātauranga I tēnei wahi. Nō reira, tēnā kōrua. Me ki te whānau o Hapori, tēnā koutou ki te whakarite, te kaupapa nei. Me ki a koutou katoa, te mihi mahana ki a koutou katoa. Ki te haere mai ki konei I tō wahi o te wahi kai. Nō reira, tēnā koutou. Me he karakia whakamutunga inai nei mo te kaupapa, kia inui tātou, kia hu, kia marino, kia whakamoimiti, kia manatu, kia mārohirohi, kia tuku, kia rite, kia tina, homi e, hui e, tai ki e. Pause, be calm. Be thankful, be mindful, be resolute, be ready, keep at it, continue on, we'll do it together. Mauri ora, kia ora.
Kia ora. Oh, kia ora koutou. Hai o koutou ahi. Ka kite.
Thank you, everyone. Bye.
Kia ora.